Hey everyone, my name is Razzy, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Bulletstorm, a game I was completely obsessed with even before it came out back in 2011. I can't even count how many times I played the demo for this game. But it came as such a huge surprise to me that Bulletstorm recently received a remaster, the full clip edition, because it didn't make a lot of money when it was originally released. Though my hopes are that this new version of Bulletstorm will be successful enough in order to warrant a sequel. And I think things are looking up for a number of reasons. Firstly, EA didn't publish this, Gearbox did, and the creators of Bulletstorm, People Can Fly, recently broke off from its parent company, Epic Games. So I have faith that the studio is heading in the right direction, or at least in a new direction. Also, when batshit Bulletstorm came out, it had to compete with tame military shooters like this and this, which dominated the FPS market. But since then, we've seen a return to form for the genre, with the release of excellently absurd titles like the Wolfenstein and Doom reboots. And the risque humor that made Bulletstorm a bit controversial is becoming more of a norm in mainstream media with the success of movies like Deadpool.
Exactly.
Unfortunately though, Bulletstorm Full Clip Edition hasn't had the smoothest launch. For starters, the game is almost 6 years old and it's being sold at nearly full price with basically no additional content, aside from the playable Duke Nukem that doesn't even come included unless you pre-ordered the game.
Suck it up.
The upgrade also isn't too phenomenal on the regular PS4, where I played it. The standard edition of Bulletstorm was already gorgeous, but perhaps nostalgia is clouding my judgment. Regardless, I noticed some flat, stretched, and pixelated textures, along with some basic geometry that probably could have been fixed here, especially given the asking price. Also, there has already been some more controversy surrounding a partnership that Gearbox made with, let's just say, a shady website called G2A.com that hasn't really painted a pretty picture for Bulletstorm. But hopefully the game is able to move past all this stuff, because I just really want a sequel. Here is why I think Bulletstorm was ahead of its time, and a bit behind its time, in a way. A lot of what I'm about to say is extracted from an excellent video about Doom and Titanfall 2 on GameMaker's Toolkit, a video series that is obviously a huge source of inspiration for me. Definitely check that out, because it's the most recent game I've played to be built with similar ideas in mind. I'm mainly going to be comparing Bulletstorm to Doom 2016. As Mark Brown states, most FPSs released in recent years have done very little to innovate. There's a definite formula when it comes to them, and while some might be presented differently to others, they all have a tendency to rely on similar gameplay mechanics. Classic shooters like the original Doom define the genre with fun, run-and-gun gameplay utilizing a multitude of distinct weapons against a range of different enemies with various strengths, weaknesses, and behaviors that demanded a surprisingly tactical mindset. Today, the general AAA shooter is focused on simulating realism, and reality is slow and, for the most part, quite boring. You'll be spending a lot of those games aiming down sights, because scopes on guns are supposed to make you more accurate, right? So aiming from the hip is then generally designed to be shit, and while ADS, you move a lot slower. For the most part, games like Doom 2016 reject scoping in, and your accuracy doesn't change depending on your movement speed. Each enemy type, which behaves distinctly differently to another, uses various melee attacks or slow-moving projectile-based weapons that you can dodge. And you don't need to reload either. So instead of hiding behind cover to avoid getting hit or to reload your weapon and popping out to take shots, you're constantly moving around your enemies, firing your gun and dodging attacks in order to be as efficient as you possibly can. And if you get hit, you won't be forced to retreat because your health won't regenerate unless you collect more of it by heading towards a wounded demon and executing it with a glory kill. You're always engaging with your foes, strafing around them or meleeing them because these systems encourage you to do so. Bulletstorm also places a similar emphasis on speed, and it expects you to make tons of subconscious decisions in each combat encounter, but it goes about it in a couple fundamentally different ways. It has aim down sights, and it expects you to hide behind cover when you've taken too many hits. It also has no jump button, and it doesn't prioritize strafing. You also have to reload. All this stuff is synonymous with games like Call of Duty and Battlefield, but Bulletstorm utilizes a couple different mechanics that allow the game to keep its momentum. Firstly, you can kick enemies away from you. Secondly, you can pull them towards you with your leash. Both actions place your foe in a brief stasis of sorts, in which there's a couple seconds where they can barely move before hurtling through the air. This gives you time to shoot them in the face, reload your weapon, or get the hell out of there. Which leads me to the fact that you can also slide away from or towards enemies. Like everything in Bulletstorm, this doesn't really obey the laws of physics. Also, you can do multiple things at once. You can reload and kick or slide, so having to fill up your weapon isn't as much of a mission when you're being attacked. The problem is that there are often loads of enemies attacking you at once, and approaching each of them in this manner is simply unmanageable. Luckily, the game gives you multiple forms of crowd control in order to assist with situations like these. Your movement speed is fast, so walking around can help you herd melee enemies, along with the leash and kick. And like Doom, its varied arsenal of weapons have secondary fire options that you unlock at drop kits. Most end with devastating explosions that you can tie to other enemies if you time it correctly. Furthermore, the Thumper gives you the ability to fling all the baddies in the immediate vicinity into the air, freezing them there to give you time to plan your next move. Unlike Doom, the environment plays an important part in Bulletstorm because you can use it as a weapon as well. There are thorny cacti, metallic rods, man-eating plants, explosive barrels, exposed cables, and the list goes on. And you can kick or pull your enemies into each of these things. While the enemies are definitely not as distinct or as interesting as in Doom, enemy variety is important in Bulletstorm because you'll need to prioritize who you should try to kill first and with what weapon. Some of them fall into the same category as in most FPS games, with regular dudes who just shoot at you with machine guns, snipers, shotguns, and some that charge you to melee. But others cannot be kicked or leashed easily. Some are heavily armored. Some have weak points on their bodies that can detonate if you focus your fire, and some can ensnare you with an explosive that prevents you from doing anything until it erupts. So yeah, a big part of Bulletstorm is about picking targets. The thing is, because Bulletstorm still has the same systems that most first-person shooters have these days, it runs the risk of not properly convincing players to experiment with its more unique mechanics. Enter the skill shot system. Bulletstorm encourages you to use all the abilities at your disposal by awarding you more points depending on how skillful your kills are. And you use these points to buy more weapons, secondary fire options, ammo, etc. I'd say most players are going to need this stuff in order to progress, so the game kind of forces you to play in a manner that is unsafe and unfamiliar, and it's anything but a chore once you understand that. Also, skill shots decrease in value once you first perform them, so you're constantly going to have to find new killing methods if you want to gain more points. Unfortunately, Bulletstorm does falter in a couple areas for me. The skill shot system can be a bit too rewarding. At the very least, it helps early game to get players to learn new tactics and mechanics, and as a result, they're more likely to experiment later on. But you could make the argument that, at least if you're a decent player, the late game is too easy because of just how much cash you have. Or at least that's what I noticed when I played most recently. Maybe I'm just really good, but I doubt that. At least it makes engaging with drop kits quicker. You're not pausing the action for a substantial period of time as you engage with a menu. I find myself jumping in for a number of seconds, purchasing what I need on the fly. Also, you can only carry 3 weapons in Bulletstorm. It's better than 2, but having access to the entire arsenal would mean you don't have to stop time swapping them out at corpses or drop kits. Thankfully, there's a New Game Plus mode here that lets you carry all weapons at once, but still, it's not part of the main game and it's more of an afterthought. The fact that you constantly have to purchase ammo is also a bit unnecessary. In my experience, I don't think the enemies drop enough of it, and the ammo boxes lying around didn't really make up for it. Furthermore, quite a few of these weapons are hit scan, meaning you can't really dodge them easily. But Bulletstorm doesn't really have as much of an emphasis on strafing, so I guess this is more of an observation than a complaint. I'd like for there to be no take cover to heal system, which my previous point kind of ties into. It works in some cases, but you get overrun frequently, and retreating from combat contributes to losing the momentum you're constantly expected to build up. There are still so many other interesting ways of going about doing health in games, and I think Bulletstorm could have benefited from something different, especially considering how much it already experiments with other traditional shooter mechanics. I'm not saying go with the glory kill mechanic, because that might not work in Bulletstorm. And I'm not saying Bulletstorm should be Doom either, and who knows, maybe shifting things around with Bulletstorm's gameplay will just ruin or even break it. Anyway, Bulletstorm also ensures that you nearly always have a companion at your side, an idea that games like Call of Duty grip far too tightly. That franchise treats you like an idiot, putting you behind someone who tells you exactly what to do and who doesn't let you progress without them one step ahead of you. In Bulletstorm, sometimes you do need people to open doors and such, but at the very least they actually keep up with you as you run, and they'll change their speed accordingly, and they mostly let you do the door kicking, which is nice.
That's it, Ishii. Dinner time.
One of the things I find so surprising about Bulletstorm is how adequate its story is. It's definitely nothing terribly original, but underneath this crass exterior is a game that actually has some heart to it. It's about Grayson Hunt, a guy trying to redeem himself. Something the game doesn't really let you forget because of how frequently it reminds you that he messed things up for his crew. Like, big time. But there are some touching moments throughout this campaign. It's far from a masterpiece, though it's compelling enough, even if most of the dialogue and the over-the-top nature of the villain makes it too difficult to take him or the cause seriously. The dialogue, especially at the beginning of the game, is kind of a love it or hate it sort of thing. It all too often tries to creatively string together profanity without too much care for tonal consistency. Sometimes it wants to be cheesy and childish, but other times it really wants you to take its characters seriously. I did notice that Grayson's profanity actually significantly reduces as you progress through the game, contributing to his character development in a way, I suppose. Nonetheless, it's difficult pinpointing if Bulletstorm is actually being ironic at times because of the constant shifts in tone. The entire ending climax seems like a blatant Modern Warfare 2 parody, but at the same time, it doesn't? But what I love is that, unlike Far Cry Blood Dragon, Bulletstorm doesn't make fun of things like tutorials in order to make you forgive the fact that it's putting you through one. Instead, it embraces its cheesy sci-fi setting and the fact that it knows it's a video game to explain things in the most absurd way, poking fun at TV shows and games that take themselves far too seriously and which use cringy, overcomplicated terminology in order to sound smart. You and Gray don't care about that shit, and he outright tells people who are dishing out this information to stop.
On his back, that's a Confederate Rhinoblast Megacharger filled with the backpack. That's all you gotta say.
The game even tries to gauge whether or not you're getting sick of the constant bickering between its characters, and often they'll downright tell each other to shut up.
You're like my own personal rabbit's foot, boss. Rainbows, puppies, and lucky fucking clovers spew from your ass.
Shut up. Come on, the other exit.
Like Doom Guy, Gray just wants to shoot and kill things. He doesn't care about discretion. Arguably, Doom did it better and more subtly, because the player character expressed himself only through his body language, and he didn't need to back up his actions by talking about dicks. The comedic timing in Doom was a lot better, in my opinion, and it didn't seem to try as hard to be funny as Bulletstorm does. But humor is obviously entirely subjective. Those are just my thoughts on the matter.
We're only temporarily disabling the tower. You need to remove each lens individually. Carefully release the hinges.
Warning. Energy contamination detected.
But Bulletstorm and Doom might have more in common than you'd originally expect. The soundtrack for each game is awesome, even if Doom's is a bit more memorable. Nonetheless, the main theme for Bulletstorm still remains one of my favorites out of any game that I've played. Also, both games share similar characteristics with regards to their setting. Doom's space station on Mars was equally as ludicrous, researching energy from hell with propaganda holograms constantly informing you on their business ventures and reassuring you of your safety. The place ended up torn to shit, obviously, with gory environments sprinkled with corpses. Kind of a post-apocalyptic setting, same as Bulletstorm, except Bulletstorm is set on an abandoned tropical resort planet, which means its environments are a lot more vibrant and diverse, with lovely colors and lighting that Doom lacked because of its limited setting. You visit so many different locations on this planet that really feel lived in. I think Bulletstorm's world building is just as strong and as eccentric as Doom's, and it has so much potential to be expanded upon. So, as you can see, I think it's fair to say that Bulletstorm was kind of ahead of its time in a couple ways, because it decided to go backwards instead of sticking with the same boring trends you see in most modern first-person shooters. Even way back in 2011, it remembered what made shooters fun before they became all about the US versus Russia, unimaginative mechanics, weapons, and brown environments. Like Doom 2016, it's fast, with a plethora of interesting weapons that are satisfying to fire upon a range of enemies that each have their own strengths, weaknesses, and behaviors. And most importantly, Bulletstorm never grew repetitive or boring for me, whereas Doom did slightly after a while. I love the game, but that's my honest opinion. Bulletstorm isn't perfect. It's tonally inconsistent at times, and it doesn't always dedicate itself entirely to a style of gameplay and storytelling. But it's a game that has so much potential to be even better, and I think it needs a sequel that can refine its gameplay, rectify other issues, and resolve the damn cliffhanger it ends on too. And I think that, in this day and age, it can be successful. Doom 2016 proved that. It showed that maybe people are tired of all the military shooter tropes. It's unfortunate that the full clip edition is so unrealistically expensive, because for that alone, it's probably not going to sell enough copies to warrant a sequel. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully something turns up and we get to eventually see a sequel to Bulletstorm, even if it's more of a spiritual successor and it doesn't share the same title. I think that's actually more likely. Anyway, let me know what you thought of what I had to say about Bulletstorm. Let me know what you thought of the game if you've played it. And yeah, other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great day, and I will see you all in the next one.